You are now listening to the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. My guest today is Eric Parker, who is running for City Council in Jacksonville, Florida. Today, we are going to talk about his background, his campaign, his vision for his city, and his political worldview. Eric, welcome to the Protestant Libertarian Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, so before we get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and what you do for work.
Okay, so my name's Eric Parker. I born in Jacksonville. I grew up in Northeast Florida, the small town of Yulee, Florida. Graduated from Fernandina Beach High School. I joined the Army Reserves right out of high school. Did 9 years as a military police officer. I deployed to Iraq. I deployed to Guantanamo Bay. I came home, proposed my wife at the airport after my deployment to Guantanamo Bay. And we bought a place up here on the north side of Jacksonville. And we've been pretty much living here for nearly a decade. I used my GI Bill, got my bachelor's in supervision and management, and I'm currently an electronics technician on a Navy base here. It's in South Georgia, the base that I work at, but it's 30 minutes from Jacksonville, Florida. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, that's a lot of experience, especially being an Army vet and traveling around the world and kind of understanding how the military works. So how do your experiences, both as like an Army vet and now working in the electronics industry, shape the way that you think about politics and the decisions that you would make on city council?
So with nearly 17 years of experience, both in the military and then as a government contractor, I've seen the levels of, I guess, how bureaucracy and overregulation kind of get in the way of the private sector. I have experience working on government contracts and bidding on hours and projects, and I have seen the level of waste that can be involved with government contracts. So I think that'll play a huge role whenever I'm working on government contracts here at the local level.
Yeah, that's great. So you're a libertarian and you're running as a libertarian. How did you become a libertarian?
So I had a economics class in high school my senior year and had a libertarian professor or libertarian leaning professor. I'm pretty sure he was registered libertarian. He didn't really get into his personal politics that much, but he did make sure whenever we had debates about government spending that he taught us about Austrian economics, free market capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, supply and demand. It was basic level economics class, but I think it really changed the way that I looked at economics at a younger age. I was probably 16 at the time, maybe 17. And ever since then, I always had that idea about free market capitalism. And then I remember graduating high school. The next election was the first time I remember Ron Paul running as the Republican candidate in 2008, and just paying attention to the debates and listening to what Ron Paul had to say about libertarianism within the Republican Party, changed my perspective. And then, of course, my time served in the military played a really big role. I didn't feel like we should have ever been in Iraq in the first place, and yet I had signed a contract to serve my country, and I got deployed there. And, I served honorably, but in my deep down, I felt like maybe we shouldn't have been there. I definitely feel like we shouldn't have been there. And that changed my perspective. Now, I was a registered Republican up until 2020, but just what the government did here, even in the state of Florida, at the state level, pushed me away from the Republican Party and into the Libertarian Party. And then decided to run for city council because our local city council passed an ordinance fining small businesses $500 if they had 50 or more people on the property. And this is in the supposed free state of Florida that everyone talks about, but they had authoritarianism even at our local level. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you are a member of the Libertarian Party, and there are a lot of libertarians that aren't affiliated with the LP, but you are. What made you want to join the Libertarian Party instead of just kind of pushing your libertarian principles further and further?
Yeah, I would say that I don't feel like there was a libertarian wing of the Republican Party any longer here in the state of Florida, and especially at the local level here in Jacksonville. So I don't necessarily encourage people, if they're liberty leaning and they're willing to get politically involved and contact their representatives. I don't necessarily try to convince people to change their political party to Libertarian just because I am one. Now, I do make sure that they are informed with where I stand politically and what the Libertarian Party can do to I think this term gets overused, but push that Overton window. And that's what I think we're doing here in Jacksonville. Um, we have a Republican supermajority here in Jacksonville City Council, Republican, yet they voted to double the gas tax, voted to increase the millage rate. They've done all of this. They voted to fine small businesses $500 during the COVID era. So that's all from a super Republican majority city council. So that's one reason why it's important to me to accomplish this running under the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, and you are involved in the local Libertarian Party affiliate, which is the Libertarian Party of Duval County. Talk to us about your role with the LPDC and some of the party goals.
So, like, I'm not an officer on the affiliate, but we have a great local affiliate here in Duval County, and we're trying to grow. And what we're doing right now is we're actually running 3 Libertarian candidates for Jacksonville City Council. You have me, I'm running in the at-large 1 race. We have Jerry Tubb Rurabaugh, goes by Pastor Tubb. He's running in at-large 5. And then we have Ronald Tracy Robinson, and he is running in District 8. So depending on where you live, if you live in District 8, you'll have 3 Libertarians that you can vote for on the ballot. If you live anywhere else in Duval County, in Jacksonville, you'll have 2 Libertarian candidates you can vote for. And what I'm trying to accomplish right now is to honestly show people that we have a true and vibrant third party for them to choose from, one that stands for economic freedom, individual liberty, and limited government. So that's my role. Moving forward, our goal is going to be to try to recruit and vet candidates and try to teach them how to run a big campaign, because here in Jacksonville, an at-large race has the potential for 650,000 plus registered voters in Duval County, a city that represents over 1 million people. So, I mean, that's a big race. That's really pretty close to some congressional races, maybe even bigger. That's bigger than some state representative races. It costs more to pay to get on the ballot for a city council seat than it does to run for state legislature here. So it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and maybe before we get into the reasons why you decided to run and just how you're operating your campaign, I'm from kind of a smallish town in Kentucky, and so when we have a city council race, it's every time there's an election, there are 10 names on the ballot. You pick 8, and the people that get the most votes are the ones that are on city council. So I think being in a big city like Jacksonville, Florida, it's completely different. So just mechanically, you talked about how there are kind of different groups. How does it all work?
Yeah, so here we have 14 different districts in Jacksonville City Council, and redistricting just happened. There was actually some federal lawsuits. It might have been on the news. I don't know that Jacksonville local election news is getting all the way up there, but there were lawsuits involved. Redistricting happened, but we have 14 districts and then 5 at-large seats. For the 5 at-large seats, you have to live in a certain area, Jacksonville, but all of Duval County and Jacksonville and the beaches and Baldwin, everyone in Duval County can vote in those elections. You mentioned earlier, I think before we went live, you were asking about like, hey, why is this election an off year? I think that is intentional. That is the establishment. That's the local political establishment here that wants to maintain control and have the people that they've chosen to run not get upset in an election. So that's one reason why us running as third party candidates is good, because now we can get people that might not usually show up to vote in one of these elections. We can offer them as something different and give them a reason to show up. But I think it's intentional because they don't want, the average voter to have so much influence in a local election. They intentionally want their establishment choices to get in office. So that's why they do it in an off year.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and talk about your campaign then. That makes a lot of sense. So, you guys are sitting on a Republican majority on city council right now, and supposedly the Republican Party is all about freedom and liberty and all of that kind of stuff. But apparently, that has not been the case in the way that they have run the city of Jacksonville. So, on your website, you specifically identify cronyism and the limiting of individual liberties as major issues for Jacksonville. And you've kind of hinted at that already in this conversation. Could you explain what's currently happening with all of those and then how you would address those as a councilman?
So, I mean, what is really happening here is you have your political elite establishment, and once they're in office, they are consistently voting for like corporatism or corporate welfare, going to the well connected business partners and the politically involved around Jacksonville. I think 17 of the 19 council members are involved with some nonprofit around Jacksonville that is consistently being given taxpayer funding. A lot of them have been given cush jobs on some of the, like the Downtown Investment Authority, for example, which receives taxpayer funding. And then that crowned prince, if you will be chosen as the next mayoral candidate. And then they get a really great salary. Or there's some contractors around Jacksonville that also have someone that will be on current city council, and then they'll just be given a great job with one of these companies around Jacksonville that are constantly getting government contracts. So it happens up and down, not just Republicans. It happens on both sides of the aisle. But the way that we are made up here politically, out of the 19 seats, I want to say 13 or 14 are Republicans. It's a super majority Republican, but there's still out of control spending. There's still tax increases and corporate welfare happening every other week. So, I mean, that's how I kind of got involved before I decided to run. Is I was working at a local craft brewery in Jacksonville. They were nearly put out of business at the state level because of the COVID lockdowns. And then they were forced to get a restaurant license, get a hot dog roller, become a restaurant so that they could open. And then they were 2 weeks away from closing the door. Once they stayed open, local Jacksonville City Council passed that ordinance fining small businesses $500 if they had 50 or more people on the property. I started going to city council meetings to speak up against that, and I kept going to every single one after that, because I was speaking up against all the different forms of corporate welfare. I would really just look at the agenda, look for the dollar signs and the zeros and commas, and I would look up the companies that taxpayer subsidies was going to, and I would do research on the companies, and I would just go there and call them out. And then you could look up where some of those same companies have contributed to political candidates in the past. So, that's it's deep too. I mean, like, we're just scratching the surface here in the Libertarian Party, but the more we're getting involved, you can see the same people are behind funding a lot of the establishment candidates.
Yeah, so you have all of this corruption and cronyism on city council, and obviously running a very large city like Jacksonville is extremely challenging. What are some of the problems that are being faced by the people of Jacksonville right now that you would address as city councilman?
So I think number one of the biggest issues that the people in Jacksonville are facing is the same issues that everyone's facing all across the United States. The out of control inflation, which, as we know as libertarians, is caused by increasing the money supply. Well, what you see here, and we saw it around 2020, is a lot of these local municipalities received some of that free COVID money, but now we're seeing what it's costing us. My number one concern that a lot of people, what I'm worried about, is the out of control debt that we have here in Jacksonville. We're considered a sinkhole city. I think it's a $3+ billion debt. It's an unfunded pension problems from the past that, instead of tackling our debt here in the city, we're focused on giving out handouts to the well connected all over Jacksonville. So I want to focus on our debt, because if we have an economic downturn, which I think a lot of people are kind of predicting it, and you kind of see that as the Fed keeps increasing it, that we can't get this under control. There's the discussions at the federal level about the debt ceiling and all of that. Like, if we end up having an economic downturn and we can't fund the liabilities that we have, is going to be in bad shape here in Jacksonville. So that's my number one issue. I want to cut the gas tax. So back in 2021, they doubled our local gas tax. Now, it doubled from 6 cents to 12 cents. It's not a huge issue. Oh, 6 more cents a gallon. But my issue with it is it really is a regressive tax. It hurts the poorest among us here in Jacksonville. It hurts the people in Jacksonville that don't live and work downtown. It hurts the people that have to drive 30, 45 minutes to work every day. The ones that live outside of the areas where 40% of this gas tax was going to benefit some of the more areas closer to downtown with a bike path and call it the Emerald Trail, a greenway walking path. It was going to help out 4 of the 14 districts, but 40% of the funding was going to that one project. So I want to repeal the gas tax increase.
Yeah, that's great. Well, there are a lot of people, obviously, that are very familiar with progressivism and conservatism because they're kind of the two main political philosophies in the United States right now. But libertarianism is kind of a mystery for a lot of people, and I think it's just not been promoted as much as it has been in the last couple of years. So I want to talk about how your political philosophy as a libertarian would shape your time in office. So as a libertarian, how would those libertarian principles direct the votes that you cast while you're in office?
So I like to say, to me, libertarianism, and I think I've already said it, is limited government, economic freedom, and individual liberty. A lot of people use the saying, fiscally conservative, socially liberal. Um, and then some people have recommended we got to get away from putting it into liberal and conservative because you're giving both sides of the argument attention that they don't deserve. I think it's easier for people who aren't already libertarians to look at it from that perspective because they've already kind of associated themselves with one group or the other. But we're seeing that around here in Jacksonville. Whenever you actually get out and talk to people about their concerns, what they're concerned with is like, hey, I know we're paying taxes and I know that there's several $billion of government spending here in Jacksonville with all the different authorities that we have. But they're like, but why can't my trash get picked up? My recycling get picked up? Why do we still have like crumbling infrastructure on roads and potholes? And what's happening to the money? So I think with libertarianism, we can be like, you're exactly right, regardless, Republican, Democrat, progressive, conservative, what both sides are telling you they stand for isn't what's happening down here at City Hall. I mean, you know what I mean? The progressive side will say, oh, we need to tax more, and then that will solve all of our problems. Well, we could see they've increased the millage rate and the gas tax, but you still have crumbling infrastructure. Still have the septic tank phase out program was supposed to happen 30 years ago, but that money was taken from that project and sent down to some special interest project. So I think what we could do here with libertarianism is bring more transparency to what's actually happening at City Hall, whereas I don't think most of the establishment politicians are concerned about actually fixing the issues. They just want to maintain power.
Yeah, so you are obviously, it's a super majority Republican city council, and I'm guessing the other seats are run by Democrats, obviously. So if you get elected to this seat, how are you going to approach working with the other members of city councils that are either Republicans or Democrats?
So, and that is a unique issue that we have here. Like running at large, my job is to represent all of Jacksonville, and you have different areas and different communities all over Jacksonville, and then different district council members. And it's their job to, in my opinion, to represent the people that elected them, which is their district. It's my job to make sure that all of Jacksonville is working together with the funds that we have available. And I think it's my job to be more of a liaison between our government agencies that we currently have here and the people that elected me to office. My job isn't what we see a lot of times is our elected representatives try to be the spokespeople for the government. I was like, no, your job is to be the spokespeople for the people that elected you to office and to help them navigate through dealing with our local government and making sure that the services that they do pay taxes for are at least they're getting what they're paying for. And that's not happening. So I do have to work with like the district, regardless of political party. I'm just the people in there, all of the districts of Jacksonville, and hopefully their representative. And I hope to be that guy that whenever they're contacting their district or the other 4 at-larges, that whenever they can't get them to answer their emails or give them a phone call back, that I'll be the guy like, don't worry, I'll go talk with them. We'll set up a meeting. We'll get this issue resolved.
Yeah, that's great. So the Libertarian Party at the national level has obviously a policy platform, and they direct a lot of their effort electorally towards kind of implementing those sort of policy goals. Do you think that those libertarian principles should be implemented differently at the national level than at the state or local level, or is there kind of a balance between the two? How do you see the national goals of the party intersecting with what you would do as a city councilman in Florida?
So I do think that the policies can be scaled down, if you will. For example, cutting taxes, cutting spending. That's what we're all about that we could do here locally. Now, all of the large national platform is a little bit different than how we would do it here locally. But I think that you could find areas where we can apply our libertarian philosophy right here, cutting the millage rate, cutting the gas tax, um, decriminalizing marijuana. I would like to make Jacksonville, Duval County a Second Amendment sanctuary city. It's the only county around here in Northeast Florida that isn't, even with this Republican supermajority. There's a lot of things that we could do that apply to some of the federal level platforms, but we can handle them here locally. And I do think there's kind of a movement currently in the Libertarian Party with a lot of people focusing on decentralization or localization. So I do think that we could do that here to a certain level and be able to apply a lot of those libertarian principles in a decentralized way here in Jacksonville.
Yeah, so I think over the last 3 years, and you've talked about COVID, and you've talked about all of the fallout that we've experienced politically from just everything that the federal government has done over the last few years. And I've been noticing, particularly in the last 9 to 10 months, that there are a lot of kind of traditional Republicans that are starting to give libertarianism more of a glance, because I think that they realize that their actual personal principles align more with libertarianism than they do with the traditional Republican Party. How do you go about convincing libertarian-oriented Republicans that might still be hanging on to that Republican label to vote for a libertarian?
So we're doing it right now. Like, for an example, we had a candidate forum yesterday, and it was a nonpartisan forum. It was by a faith-based organization, a Christian organization. And the fact that, you had three libertarians show up out of, I don't know, there's 15 people there, and we're able to push the argument back towards what a lot of these people think their Republican Party is about. That's what they're sold and that's what they're told by their party. But then they end up electing or voting for and electing big government politicians. So I think we're doing a great job here in Jacksonville. And I think that's what libertarian candidates are supposed to do. They could just remind people that are liberty leaning, like, hey, look, you actually have an opportunity to vote for your principles or you can vote for your party. It's up to you to choose, though. So.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and tell us a little bit about the person that you're running against in this election.
Okay, so my opponent, his name is Terrence Freeman. He is a Republican opponent. I have one opponent, and that's why this is kind of a unique race. So I was running in a district race with three Republicans in it, but it was in a district that after the primary, the general election, the Republican one was 70% of the vote. So it was the most Republican district in Jacksonville. So I felt like my odds when I was running before was good for me to get through the primary, because if they split the Republican, I got everybody, I would have made it to the general. But I really felt like once I got to the general election, regardless of how hard I worked, I just wasn't going to be able to get over that hump. But with this race, it's all of Jacksonville. So Jacksonville has more registered Democrats in the county of Duval County. Now, whether or not they vote in local elections or not, that's yet to be seen, at least in this race. But my race is special because my opponent is an establishment Republican. He voted to double the gas tax. He voted to increase the millage rate. He voted against repealing the gas tax. For the Republicans out there, he voted for a Democrat president for city council over a Republican president for city council. He voted for that bill that I mentioned earlier to fine small businesses $500. He voted to give multiple times to give $100 million to the NFL football team here in Jacksonville. So, I mean, he's a big government, corporate welfare, big spender, more taxes. So that's really what I'm running against. You know what I mean? And here in Jacksonville, all of Duval County gets a chance to vote for me, and they get a chance to vote for someone that's going to rein in some of that large government spending.
Yeah, I mean, I like those odds, especially with the messaging that you guys have down there. So, in the bio on your website, you say that Jesus and family are the two most important aspects of your life. How has your faith in your family shaped both your personal life and your perspective on politics?
It's definitely made me want to be I guess, a servant leader and represent, the people righteously. Now, I got saved in high school, and I kind of, backslid, if you will, the time that I was in the military. But since we've lived here in Jacksonville, we started going to a church down the street, Bold City Church. They meet in a high school here in Jacksonville, and we've been pretty involved with our church for almost 5 years now. So I've been pretty involved. That's kind of what led me to, during COVID, seeing how the faith-based community was being crushed with some of the regulations and lockdowns. Our church, because they meet in a high school, they weren't allowed to meet, so it went online. Just seeing how the government was overstepping their role, which they should have no role at all in people's faith and religion, motivated me to get involved politically as well. And at the time, I don't know if you ever heard of the Freedom Curriculum. It's pretty good, I guess, a Bible study curriculum. It's really great. I was going through that at the time, and I was praying a lot, and I was like, God, I feel like there's something I'm supposed to do here to make a difference in my community. Could you please give me an idea? And he's like, hey, look, have you thought about that? I just felt like there was a calling on me to at least get involved and to show people both in the faith-based community and the political realm how much, in my opinion, the libertarian philosophy lines up with biblical principles.
No, that's great. Well, go ahead and give us the final sales pitch here. Why should residents of Jacksonville vote for you?
So I'm a regular blue collar guy. I've lived on the Northeast Florida my entire life. I lived in Jacksonville for nearly a decade. I saw what the out of control government was doing at this federal, state, and local level, and it made me want to step up and do something instead of just talking about it. I believe in economic freedom, individual liberty, and limited government. And I'm hoping that all of Jacksonville is tired of the status quo and they're ready for something different. My name's Eric Parker. You can go to ericparkerforjacks.com. I have a Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Eric Parker for Jacksonville City Council @large1, a Twitter @EricP904. Please reach out. Anyone in Jacksonville, if you have any questions about my platform, or if you'd like to meet, or you would like a yard sign or any of that, please let me know. Yeah, that's it.
That sounds great. So when is the election?
So election day is March 21st. Early voting starts, I think it's March 6th. Absentee or mail-in ballots should probably be getting there right now. So hopefully you've seen some of my door hangers or knockers, or received a phone call from me reminding people to vote for me. But March 21st is the election day. May, I don't have it with me anymore because now that I'm running against one person, this is the race for me. So people do need to remember that Jacksonville local elections are open, unitary. Some people call it, I think, jungle primary. You can vote outside of party lines in the primary election. If there's more than two candidates, the top two will make it to the general election. But in my race, there's just two of us, and it's going to be whoever gets that 50% plus one vote is going to win this election.
Well, Eric Parker, it's been great having you on the show. If I lived in Jacksonville, I would 100% vote for you. So best of luck with the campaign.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts about the show, please reach out to me at theprotestantlibertarian@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @ProLibertyPod. Again, you can follow me on Twitter @ProLibertyPod. You can also support the show by leaving a rating or a review on your favorite podcast app. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.